A storm is brewing at the heart of British politics, and it's not just political rivals or protesters raising alarm. In a move that's sending shockwaves through Westminster, one of the UK's top judges has reportedly broken all protocol to urgently warn King Charles himself about a secret plan that could see Britain dragged back under the grip of the European Union. This isn't speculation. It's not a drill. It's a clear sign that behind closed doors, a quiet betrayal is taking place, led by none other than Prime Minister Keir Starmer. With the May 19th UK-EU summit just days away, the stakes have never been higher. What the public is not being told could rewrite the future of British sovereignty, and it's unfolding faster than anyone imagined. In recent weeks, whispers have turned into full-blown alarm bells. Trusted insiders in Whitehall and the legal system are now confirming what many feared. Keir Starmer's administration is preparing to unveil a sweeping plan at the upcoming UK-EU summit, one that effectively reopens the door for Britain's return to EU control. While the Prime Minister publicly maintains a message of moderation and cooperation, leaked documents and testimonies from senior civil servants suggest something far more dangerous is taking place in the background. These secret negotiations go far beyond trade or regulatory alignment. They signal a deeper entanglement that risks overturning the very outcome of the 2016 Brexit referendum. But it's not just politicians who are concerned. The judiciary has taken an unprecedented step, raising grave constitutional concerns. A top UK judge, whose identity remains confidential for legal and security reasons, is said to have requested a private meeting with King Charles. The reason? To alert the monarch to Starmer's covert re-entry strategy, a plan that reportedly includes ceding judicial powers back to the European Court of Justice. If true, this would mean British courts, after years of regaining control, would once again answer to foreign oversight, all without public consultation or parliamentary debate. The judge's warning was clear: Britain is on the verge of a constitutional rupture. By bypassing democratic channels and using executive authority to strike deals with Brussels, Starmer is effectively sidestepping the people. The referendum was supposed to settle the matter. Brexit was done, or so we were told, but behind the reassuring speeches and polite press conferences lies a trail of legal manoeuvring that paints a far darker picture. The urgency of this situation is reflected in the sheer secrecy surrounding the judge's visit to the palace. According to palace insiders, the meeting was kept off official logs, and staff were instructed to maintain total discretion. This wasn't a ceremonial call. It was a constitutional warning, a moment so serious that it could indicate a crisis in the making. Though King Charles holds no formal power to halt government policy, the fact that such a meeting even occurred signals a level of concern rarely seen in British public life. Meanwhile, Starmer continues to downplay any talk of reversing Brexit. He speaks of building bridges, of resetting relations with Europe. But the reality behind those phrases is stark. The upcoming summit is not a casual diplomatic gathering. High-ranking EU officials, including European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and Council President Charles Michel, are expected to attend. Sources say binding agreements will be presented, agreements that reintroduce elements of EU law into British life, from environmental standards to worker mobility programmes. The most alarming aspect of these discussions is the so-called Judicial Cooperation Framework. According to leaked policy drafts, the UK would agree to align certain areas of domestic law with EU directives and allow the European Court of Justice to act as an arbiter in disputes. In essence, the same court we fought to escape could soon be back in control, this time invited in quietly, with no referendum, no national debate and no consent. And it doesn't stop there. Alongside legal reintegration, a youth mobility scheme is being negotiated, presented as a harmless cultural exchange programme for under-30s. But behind the soft branding is a very clear agenda: to reinstate free movement. First young workers, and students, then expanded categories, then inevitably full freedom of movement. Brexit wasn't reversed overnight. It's being dismantled brick by brick. For now, the public remains largely unaware. Media outlets loyal to the establishment have reported on the upcoming summit in neutral, even glowing terms. But beneath the surface, insiders are beginning to leak information out of fear, not just political fear, but fear for the future of Britain's democratic integrity. What's coming on May 19th could mark the beginning of Britain's quiet return to European subservience, and the fact that a judge felt compelled to involve the king tells you everything you need to know about how serious this has become. More troubling still is the government's silence. There has been no public discussion, no parliamentary debate, and certainly no vote on these sweeping changes. It's all happening in the shadows, handshakes in hotel lobbies, signatures at private dinners, and commitments made over quiet calls. Starmer's team insists that everything is above board, that this is simply the next logical step in cooperative governance. But when unelected judges feel democracy is under threat, when they bypass all channels to appeal directly to the monarch, that's not just business as usual. That's a red flag waving in the face of the British people. As the dust begins to settle on the shocking revelation of the judge's emergency warning to King Charles, the British political establishment is already struggling to contain the fallout. The veil has been lifted, and what lies beneath is a disturbing portrait of quiet betrayal and unchecked ambition. Keir Starmer's plan to reconnect the UK to the European Union is no longer whispered speculation. It's a concrete roadmap, quietly constructed behind the scenes, hidden from voters, shielded from Parliament, and now fully exposed by a growing chorus of insiders, legal experts, and political adversaries. And perhaps no voice is louder or more furious than that of Nigel Farage. Farage, long regarded as the torchbearer of the Brexit movement, erupted in a fiery broadcast just hours after reports of the judge's warning emerged. "This is the greatest betrayal of the British people since we voted leave," he declared. Starmer thinks he can play both sides, telling the public Brexit is safe while signing deals that bring us right back under Brussels' boot. The British people will not be lied to again. His words lit up social media like wildfire. Millions of frustrated citizens who had hoped the Brexit fight was over suddenly found themselves dragged back into a political war they thought they'd already won. What's become clear is that Starmer's strategy hinges on ambiguity and stealth. While publicly rejecting any full-scale return to the EU, his government has methodically constructed a legal framework that reintroduces EU influence bit by bit. By targeting non-controversial areas, such as environmental policy, product, standards and judicial cooperation, he hopes to avoid public backlash. But experts warn that these so-called technical adjustments are anything but harmless. Each concession represents a piece of sovereignty sacrificed, each agreement a silent reversal of Brexit's core promise, that Britain would take back control. Farage's response isn't just political theatre, it taps into a growing anxiety spreading across Britain's conservative heartlands. Towns and counties that overwhelmingly backed Leave are now watching in disbelief as Starmer's government cozies up to Brussels once again, and they're not alone. Prominent Tory MPs, even some who remained quiet during past Brexit debates, are now voicing alarm. Suella Braverman, speaking from the backbenches, warned of a dangerous erosion of democratic safeguards. Jacob Rees-Mogg called it a Trojan horse operation, smuggled in through technical jargon and bureaucratic sleight of hand. For once, Farage and the Tory right are aligned in outrage, and that alignment could spell real trouble for Starmer. For it, outrage isn't just ideological, it's constitutional. By pursuing these deals without holding a vote in Parliament or consulting the electorate, Starmer's team may be skirting the very democratic principles they claim to uphold. Legal experts say that the type of international commitments being drafted, particularly those affecting judicial oversight, should require full parliamentary scrutiny, if not a national referendum. Yet Starmer presses on, aided by a media that often echoes his talking points and a civil service apparatus that quietly favours deeper EU alignment. As Farage ramps up his campaign to expose Starmer's agenda, he's finding support not just from the usual corners, but from surprising new allies. Reform UK, which had previously struggled to gain national traction, has reported a surge in membership and donations in the past 72 hours. Their message is simple. Brexit was the will of the people, and any attempt to reverse it without consent is a betrayal. Public sentiment too appears to be shifting. A recent flash poll conducted by BritVoice News showed that 63% of respondents oppose reintroducing any form of ECJ oversight, and 54% believe Starmer's summit plans should be subjected to a national vote. Fueling the fire is Starmer's refusal to directly address the allegations. When pressed by journalists at a recent press conference, he dodged questions about judicial alignment and EU court influence, instead repeating vague assurances about respecting Brexit and engaging in pragmatic diplomacy. But these hollow statements only deepen the public's suspicion. If there's nothing to hide, critics argue, then why won't he release the full text of the agreement set to be signed on May 19th? Why aren't MPs being shown the legal implications of these deals? Why the secrecy? Behind the scenes, Downing Street insiders describe a frantic effort to contain the growing backlash. Communications teams have been ordered to shift focus to domestic issues, NHS reforms, housing plans and education investments, to distract from the brewing EU scandal. But the public isn't looking away. The headlines are already dominated by phrases like secret summit, constitutional betrayal, and royal intervention. Even traditionally pro-EU voices in the media are beginning to question the wisdom of moving so swiftly and so silently towards reintegration. And then there's the palace. While the king remains publicly neutral, palace sources describe him as deeply concerned following his meeting with the judge. Charles, whose reign has been marked by cautious diplomacy, now finds himself entangled in a political firestorm not of his own making. Though he lacks the power to intervene, his role as a moral and symbolic guardian of the Constitution gives his involvement significant weight. The judge's decision to go directly to the monarch may go down as one of the most defining acts of civil disobedience in modern British legal history, a desperate attempt to uphold democratic principles in a system increasingly run by shadow deals and backdoor politics. As the May 19th summit approaches, the tension in Westminster is palpable. Starmer faces a choice: press ahead and risk a full-blown constitutional crisis, or pause, release the documents and allow a proper debate. So far, all signs suggest he's betting on silence and confusion to carry him through. But with voices like Farage growing louder, legal experts sounding the alarm, and the public beginning to stir, that silence may soon be shattered. The storm, now engulfing Westminster, has reached new explosive heights with the leak of internal government documents related to the upcoming UK-EU summit. These confidential papers, reportedly sourced from a whistleblower within the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office, have blown the lid off what critics are now calling Starmer's secret surrender plan. The documents lay bare a quiet yet radical reconfiguration of Britain's post-Brexit legal, economic and political landscape. One that, if enacted, would mark the most significant rollback of British sovereignty since joining the European, Economic Community in 1973. At the heart of these documents is a 112-page draft treaty titled Framework for Strategic Alignment and Cooperation between the United Kingdom and the European Union, dated April 26th. The text reveals an aggressive timeline for reintegrating large portions of EU law into British legislation by late 2025. In direct contradiction to Starmer's public assurances that Britain will not rejoin the EU or its institutions, the framework sets out legally binding mechanisms for cooperation that would once again subject the UK to the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, ECJ, in several areas. One of the most alarming aspects is the clause labelled Judicial Harmonisation and Mutual Recognition. This provision requires the UK to accept ECJ interpretations in matters of cross-border trade disputes, environmental standards, and digital privacy enforcement. Though Starmer has publicly dismissed any return to ECJ oversight, this clause makes it clear EU legal supremacy would once again be recognised in British courts in multiple domains. Legal experts reviewing the document warn this could render UK courts powerless in crucial sectors, effectively sidelining British judges and reimposing the same foreign legal influence that Brexit was meant to end. Economically, the document proposes a phased re-entry into the EU single market under the guise of a customs and standards alignment protocol. This cleverly worded section outlines regulatory synchronization in food safety, automotive production, pharmaceutical approvals, and carbon emissions. The language carefully avoids the term single market, but the effect is identical. British. Businesses would once again be legally required to comply with EU regulations and inspections. Worse, there are no reciprocal provisions guaranteeing British influence in shaping those rules. Britain would comply, not collaborate. For many Brexiteers, this is nothing less than capitulation. A further point of contention is the reactivation of the European arrest warrant system, shelved during Brexit. Under the leaked treaty, the UK would be compelled to resume participation in this controversial programme, allowing EU member states to demand the arrest and extradition of British citizens without requiring prima facie evidence under UK law. Civil liberties advocates are already sounding the alarm, warning that such a move could violate domestic legal protections and override long-standing principles of due process. Equally disturbing is the secrecy embedded within the document itself. Multiple pages are marked "not for parliamentary circulation" and restricted ministerial eyes only, suggesting that key decision-makers have actively worked to keep the full extent of the treaty hidden from MPs and the public. Crossbench peers have now joined Tory rebels and Reform UK leaders in demanding an emergency debate and full publication of the document. One senior legal advisor described the treaty as a quiet constitutional revolution carried out by bureaucrats, in darkness. Public backlash is now intensifying. Across Britain, especially in regions that overwhelmingly voted Leave, there is growing disbelief and anger. Social media campaigns such as Bust Stop the Sellout and Bust's EU Backdoor Deal are trending across all platforms, drawing support from across the political spectrum. Town hall meetings in the Midlands and North East have erupted in protest, with constituents demanding answers from their local MPs. Political trust, already fragile after years of Brexit turmoil, is now on the verge of complete collapse. Nigel Farage, who has been at the forefront of this resistance, returned to the airwaves with renewed vigour, presenting annotated sections of the leaked treaty live on his evening broadcast. Holding up the pages to the camera, he declared, "This is not negotiation, this is surrender. Starmer is walking Britain back into EU chains, and he's doing it behind closed doors. If this is allowed to happen, then Brexit is dead, and democracy with it." Inside Parliament, the mood is shifting fast. A coalition of Conservative backbenchers, Reform UK MPs, and even some disillusioned Labour members are now organising what they call a sovereignty caucus, a bloc aimed at forcing a public referendum before any agreement with the EU is ratified. Though Starmer commands a majority, internal dissent is spreading. Whispers of resignations and leadership challenges are beginning to circulate in the corridors of Westminster. And what of King Charles? Though constitutionally limited, the monarch's involvement is taking on symbolic urgency. The leaked documents reportedly match closely with the concerns raised in the judge's confidential briefing to the king. Sources inside the palace now suggest the king is weighing a rare public statement, not to block government policy, but to call for transparency and uphold democratic accountability. Such a move would be unprecedented in modern times and would throw yet more pressure on an already embattled Starmer. All this comes just days before the May 19th summit in Brussels, where Starmer is expected to sign the final agreement. The stage is set for a political explosion. The British public now faces a profound choice: accept this quiet return to European oversight, or rise up once again to demand the sovereignty they voted for in 2016. The next 72 hours could define the future of Britain for generations. In the following section, we will explore the role of the media in covering up, or revealing, the truth about the summit, examining how news organisations, pundits and digital platforms have responded to the unfolding crisis. Stay tuned, as the stakes continue to escalate, in what may become the most consequential political showdown since Brexit itself.